Good Sports Podcast. Today we are welcome to the Very Good Sports Podcast. Today we are previewing the NL West, and really I was planning to do it solo, had it all set up, but then at the last minute, fortunately, my good friend John Rallis messaged me and was able to do it. So John, how are you doing today?
Good, pretty good. Pretty pleased to join you right now.
Excited to talk baseball?
Of course, always.
So real quickly, introduction. Obviously, this is the start of doing Monday through Friday shows. Tuesday, I'll be talking about the Sacramento Kings in full. Always looking for guests to come on. Obviously, today, John is here to preview the NL West. And we're starting in NL West with the San Diego Padres, who had a very eventful offseason under the new general manager. They acquired Matt Kemp, Will Myers, Derek Norris, Justin Upton, and signed James Shields. John, of all those names, which one jumps out to you the most?
Well, I think you got to go with James Shields, though. Their staff isn't too bad going into it, and for him to come over and for them to sign him really validates the rotation. I mean, you saw what they did in Kansas, what he did in Kansas City too, with a younger rotation. He really helped them flourish. So, really looking forward to seeing what he can do too.
Absolutely. I mean, because James Shields, it was reported weeks leading up to his signing, he was looking for $100+ million. But San Diego, they got him for a pretty good deal after the market died down. Now we're looking at a rotation with Shields, Cashner, Tyson Ross, who I love, Ian Kennedy, and Odrisamer Despaigne, who had a pretty good rookie season coming out of Cuba for them last year, and they have the depth to back that up. Then you look towards the lineup, and the entire outfield's different. I mean, you have Will Myers in center field, Matt Kemp in right, Justin Upton in left. How do you think that's going to work out for them in their first year together?
I mean, offensively, there's so much upside there. But defensively, there's a lot of question marks with Matt Kemp's health and in Will Myers making the adjustment to center field. I mean, it's a big part, too. So it's going to take some adjusting. But, you've got 162 games to figure it out. But, if you can insert those guys in the lineup, hitting-wise, it's great to have them.
Absolutely. Hitting was something that they kind of struggled with last year. Cameron Maben in center field, Carlos Quinton was a part of their lineup. That's not a good look for them, and they were happy to change that last year. Upton and Myers, Upton and Myers really, they were looking for a change of scenery, especially Myers, who had a lot of hype. Actually, he's now teaming up with James Shields, who he was the big piece traded by Kansas City to acquire. Now they're together, and Myers is hoping to put together his potential and have a really great season. But there's also the third base battle between Will Middlebrooks and Yovar Solarte. How do you think that battle goes out?
Really not sure what you can do. You can also platoon a couple of guys if you want to, but Solarte really, he spent a lot of years in the minors. So, he did a pretty good job coming up last year when they acquired him from the Yankees. It's going to be a battle. Will Middlebrooks a few years ago was a staple there at third base, but really dropped down. His offensive game has really plummeted. So we're going to see. He's still got the upside. He can play defense too. So it'll be interesting to see that battle going forward in spring training.
Absolutely. One thing that has been mentioned by their manager is that, listen, Middlebrooks, he could also play some first base, which means Yonder Alonso, who, really, this is the team Padres leading up to before 2014, 2013, a team with a lot of high-profile prospects who never came through. You had Solarte, you had Yasmani Grandal, who's now with the Dodgers. So there's been some changes there, but they're hoping Alonso can finally put it together with a healthy season and some talent surrounding him to help get him better pitches. So that'll definitely be something to watch. And looking at this rotation, Shields, Cashner, Ross, Kennedy, Despaigne, where do you think that ranks amongst the baseball?
I think you've got to look at, I think it's one of the more underrated in terms of, James Shields really classifies that rotation, but you have Cashner and Tyson Ross up there who really, when healthy, are really good starting pitchers too. So I think health is going to be a big issue thing there. But overall, I think they're a great rotation in baseball. They can. They pitched their way into some games. They won some games based on pitching. You have the lineup now offensively, so you'd have to think they can win 15 games plus, respectively.
Absolutely. They have the great rotation, which they'll get you deep in the games, and then they have a pretty underrated bullpen. I mean, Benoit as a closer had a pretty good year. Dale Thayer, Nick Vincent, Alex Torres, who pretty
Yeah.
good, although I always think about him as having the concussion cap, which is really big and
Oh,
puffy.
exactly.
So there's definitely a lot to be excited about there. One thing, another part of their lineup, looking back towards that, is Jed Gallardo. I mean, he's shown power, but he's also battled a lot of injuries. If he can stay healthy this season, what type of impact do you think he could have in their lineup?
Well, he's going to provide some power. He's a power hitting second baseman. He had 1 year of service in the big leagues. I believe he had 23 home runs, and they signed him to that extension right away. And it was pretty sad to see him battle all those injuries. So he's got a lot of upside too. So they're really hoping that he can be that guy long term. Last year, I think they'll give him just a pass just due to the injuries and uncertainties health wise. But he's got so much power, and you don't see that a lot too much nowadays. Right now, at second base, and I mean, like you said, he's going to have some protection in that lineup, so maybe you'll see some better pitches.
Absolutely. So looking at the entire landscape of this team, Myers, Kemp, Upton, Gallardo, they added Derek Norris, who I think is an upgrade for them at catcher, and their rotation. I mean, really, it may sound crazy considering the Giants defending World Series champions, but this is a team who, if we're talking about contending for the NL West, I think we could be seeing the Dodgers finishing potentially second place, the Giants in third. What are your thoughts?
I think it's possible. I think people think a little bit being unrealistic due to the Dodgers spending spree and them committed so much into their payroll, and obviously the Giants are the defending World Series champions. But I'm not sure what people are thinking about the Padres. Just, I mean, that's a tough division too. But I think it's definitely possible. I mean, pitching I think is going to be key, and health as well. There's a lot of health uncertainties in that lineup, but they can stay healthy. They're going to contribute. I mean, they've got some depth too, like you talked about. Carlos Quentin coming off the bench, obviously no DH role in the National League, but he can come in and pinch hit a couple home runs too. He can play the outfield too, and you see Will Middlebrooks as well. I really like their team and their pitching too. So they can do a lot, and they can win the division certainly.
Absolutely. You know, this is a great credit to the new ownership and front offices they have there because this is the team. They were not spending money. I mean, they let Chase Headley go, but now you're seeing this offseason. And really, well, I'm not a San Diego Padres fan. I'm just happy for that city. They have a team who they can really throw their support behind because in years past, if you went to Petco Park, that place was usually dominated by Giants fans. And speaking of the Giants, we are moving on to the defending World Series champions. This is their third World Series now, which is just crazy to think. Because leading up to 2010, I mean, this was a team, there were a lot of questions. Still moving on from the Bonds era, but now they're here, 3 World Series. They had a pretty quiet offseason. They went hard after Pablo Sandoval, but he wanted a change of scenery. There's nothing they could do money-wise. He was just ready to move to Boston. And I will say this is a side note because there's been a lot of talk about his weight. That's just who Pablo Sandoval is. He likes to eat. He likes to have fun. This is just the panda, but he will play well. They also went after John Lester, but fell just short. Obviously, Lester went for the Chicago Cubs side. So they went quiet. They re-signed Jake Peavy. They signed Noricha Aoki, and they re-signed Ryan Vogelsong. While it was a quiet offseason, what do you think of their approach?
The defending champions, and we've seen them. You've got the best manager in the game. You've got a lot of talent there. I mean, they can really do it based on pitching. They can do it timely hitting as well. I mean, they've got a great bullpen. They know how to utilize every single one of their assets there. And I don't really think they need to do anything big this offseason. Obviously, Pablo might be a big loss. I mean, he provides a lot of intangibles too, but they've still got a solid lineup there. And the pitching, some question marks, but they can really contend if everybody can get together and stay healthy too.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned the pitching. There are other questions marks about Tim Lincecum. I've kind of been ready to move on from him, just keep him in the bullpen, give that job to someone else. But they've been loyal. That's how their organization is run. So he's getting another shot as the 5th spot. But really, the exciting part of this is Matt Cain, who, I mean, you're listening to quotes about him. He's saying the past 2 years he's been dealing with constant pain in his elbow. Buster Posey said last year every time he pitched there would be a grimace of pain. And now this year, Kane's saying how great his elbow has felt, best he's felt since he was 18. There's more zip, more control on the ball. And that's got to be exciting for a team that, considering some of the rotation questions, if you could get another potential ace like Kane back at that level, that's a huge boost.
Well, most definitely. Matt Cain, I mean, coming off the injury, it's going to be interesting to see how, monitoring him and see how he does. But I mean, you have Madison Bumgarner, I think best contract in baseball, signing to 5 years, 35 million. Definitely such a bargain, seeing what he's doing and what he's capable of too, even more so. But Matt Cain, I mean, he signed that big contract, kind of fell off, and then had the injury. Well, he had that 1 year of regression, then had that injury, so it's pretty sad. But if he can come in and really be that second guy in the rotation and really perform well, I mean, the Giants are going to be so dangerous.
I mean, and it's one of those things where the contract was disappointing. And speaking of Madison Bumgarner's contract, you said it, that's probably one of the biggest steals in baseball. Because especially when you look at Clayton Kershaw's contract, Zach Greinke's contract, Madison Bumgarner's agent, I'm sure he is just counting down the days until he can somehow get his client a raise, because that's going to be a big time payday.
Yep.
Also, one thing about this, looking at their rotation, there's question marks, but also the bullpen, which, I think it's been underrated. Santiago Casilla, he had a pretty good year as closer. Obviously, Sergio Romo lost that job, but once he got back into the setup role, I think we saw the vintage Sergio Romo with the slider and the fastball. Jeremy Affeldt, he's an older guy, but he's really good. And Javier Lopez, who, he is reliable as they come.
Oh, for sure. I mean, their bullpen's pretty good. I mean, you look at that Santiago Casilla, I mean, he's probably going to open the season as the closer. But they've also done a closers by committee approach. I mean, based on matchups, you've seen Bruce Bochy go to that. I mean, that is a pretty dominant rotation, too, and you've got guys who can play different roles as well. I mean, you see Yusmeiro Petit. He was phenomenal last season, and he's a guy who can come in and be the long man out of the rotation. You also see a guy like Hunter Strickland, who's got great stuff on his fastball. I mean, this is really solid. I mean, they've been there. They've won together. I mean, this is a group that really hasn't changed much since a World Series run, even from a few years ago. So, I mean, that's a staple. I mean, you can go in every season and going in there, and Bruce Bochy can make the call to his bullpen and have trust in them, night in and night out.
Absolutely, and I think we mentioned Bruce Bochy, probably the best manager in the game, and that is one of the things he excels the most at, is managing his bullpen, finding out when to plug in the parts at the right time, and just a master of his craft. And they could go closer by committee. And you mentioned Yusmeiro Petit, and now people remember him for his masterful playoff outing, which really throughout all the great moments. But that outing against Washington, where he went about 6 extra innings, I think that might have been the difference in getting them to the World Series. But that may not even be the highlight of his year when you consider early in the year, as part of his pitching, but also coming out of the bullpen, he set an MLB record with 46 consecutive batters retired.
It's impressive. That's really impressive, and that's a testament to their bullpen too. I mean, everybody can come in and do big things.
Absolutely. So now we do move on to lineup, which I think could be the bigger question of this team. One name I forgot to mention, obviously, the Giants acquired Casey McGee, who had a very surprising comeback player of the year campaign with the Miami Marlins season. He won't bring you a lot. He will bring you very little power, but he is reliable as that 6th or 7th hitter, and that's where we'll be hitting in the Giants lineup. Looking at this Giants lineup, Pagan, who comes with injury questions, will probably almost a guarantee to miss 40 games this year, unfortunately. But as a good leadoff hitter, you have Joe Panik, Posey, Brandon Belt, Hunter Pence, McGee, Noricha Aoki. What do you think of this Giants lineup? And while it's a quieter one, what do you think it can do?
Well, I think it's good, but I think it's really going to heavily rely on Brandon Belt, a guy who they really believe can be an offensive force. I mean, you saw him hit 17 home runs before 2 years ago. He drove in 69 runs. He was hitting the ball well. I mean, he only played 61 games last season, but he's gonna need to be really big in that cleanup position, and they're gonna rely a lot on him because the Giants really have a lot of faith in him. I mean, you look at that, you say you've got a lot of guys who can get on base too. I mean, Angel Pagan, I think, is a great leadoff hitter, really works the count. And you saw the emergence of Joe Panik last year, hitting around 300 all season long. Hunter Pence, always reliable. And Casey McGee, if he can really have a season like he did last year, he can be a really nice fit. I mean, you saw the power numbers drop off from his days in Milwaukee, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. He was really big in that lineup, and I think that's a really underrated acquisition. I know Pablo Sandoval was great at third base. I mean, he won a few World Series with the Giants, but I think Casey McGee can really. I mean, I don't think he can fully replace him, but I think he can do a nice job. I mean, I think the big concern though was the depth though. Position player-wise. I mean, you have Gregor Blanco, who I think did a nice job filling in for Pagan when he was injured. He's reliable. But aside from that, you're going to need to see Brandon Crawford's got some pop. I mean, he's going to hit in the bottom third of your lineup as well. And Aoki, I think, is a really underrated acquisition, too. I'm a huge fan of his. Really hits lefties well. And he can work counts, and he's got some speed. So, I mean, I think the Giants, I mean, although they didn't have a huge offseason, they were linked to some big names. I think they did a nice job piecing this lineup together. And they're going to be competitive for sure.
Absolutely. We share the sense of Noricha Aoki. That was, when it happened, that was actually one of my favorite signings in all of baseball in the offseason. Because really when Pagan goes, even if Pagan's healthy, Aoki could become a leadoff guy. I mean, he has that patience that the Giants really need, the ability to steal bases. And that's, I mean, if you're not going to have a bunch, this team's not going to have a bunch of power. So really you have to rely on guys getting on base, moving along the base paths to score runs, and that's something that Aoki can be a big part of.
Definitely.
And also, we mentioned Brandon Belt. I mean, this is a guy who, early in the season, first few weeks, he was crushing the ball. He had about 3 or 4 home runs in the very first series against the Arizona Diamondbacks, playing exceptionally well. Looked like the breakout season had come. But then he gets the injury, which kept him out of time. When he was finally able to come back, he hits a home run, which is a few weeks later during practice. The baseball hits him in the head, and it was a result of, well, it was an unnamed player, but it was a certain second baseman who's no longer with the team. And that caused Belt to miss another month plus of time. So, some other overall notes about this team. One thing I did love about this offseason, there weren't a lot of big-name free agents, and Giants could have, as you mentioned, gone after John Lester, signed him to a big deal, but instead they saved a bunch of money. And considering the 2016 free agent starting pitcher class, you have David Price, Johnny Cueto, Matt Latos. And while the Giants may not attract a lot of big hitters, with the money they'll have in the AT&T Park, there will be some pitchers that are very interested in playing for the Giants.
You said it.
And one other small note about this team, which I'm very excited about. Obviously, in previous seasons, their AAA affiliate was the Fresno Grizzlies. Now that a partnership has ended and they have partnered with the Sacramento Rivercats. I am from Sacramento, so I am very excited about seeing some prospects like Clayton Blackburn this season. I'm going to try and go to one game a week and see how that goes, but I'm excited.
I bet you. I would be too. I mean, obviously living in Toronto, I don't have any AAA affiliates aside for baseball. But I mean, there's Buffalo nearby. But I could only imagine how exciting it is for you not being able to go to as many Giants games. You can monitor the prospects too, so I'm sure you're pumped.
Absolutely. Now, as a Giants fan, I must say we do have to move on to the Dodgers, who seemingly every year they find more and more money to spend. This year they acquired Jimmy Rollins. Well, these were via trades, but they were able to do it in part because of the money. Jimmy Rollins, Howie Kendrick, and they had some starting pitcher too, Brandon McCarthy. That's the signing I was a fan of. But they also signed Brett Anderson, who has talent, but to a 1-year, $10 million deal.
Well, obviously, I mean, they've got money to spend. I mean, they wanted some insurance there in the back end of the rotation too. So I don't think $10 million is really much. I mean, I think Andrew Friedman and Zane Fardes, they've really got a vision, and I think they know what they're doing. But I mean, I don't think it really hurt. $10 million is pocket change to them at this point. I mean, their payroll is well over $200 million. So signing him to 1 year and hopefully he can regain his old form it's going to help them if they want to contend too. I mean, low risk, high reward type of deal.
Absolutely. If they get that high reward, we're talking about a rotation with Kershaw, Greinke, Ryu, McCarthy, as I mentioned. I'm a fan of that signing. Brett Anderson, and they also have, just as depth guys who maybe if healthy. They have Brandon Beachy, they have Dustin McGowan, they have Juan Nicasio. This is a this is a deep rotation with a bunch of options.
Definitely. I mean, it's obviously you've got Kershaw, Greinke headlining the front line of the headlining that top of the rotation. I mean, Ryu, who's really he's really good too. I mean, this is a really good rotation. Obviously, it hasn't really worked out for them in the playoffs, especially going deep in it. But I mean, you've got the best pitcher in baseball. You've got a guy who you've got a second starter who's capable of being a one on any other team, who's got a club, who's got a player option at the end at season's end too, which should be interesting. But this is one of the best rotations of baseball too, solely because of Kershaw, Greinke, and Ryu. I mean, Brandon McCarthy too. I mean, he's going to be slated into that four hole. He really looked revitalized when he was wearing the pinstripes last season, and I think the Dodgers got a really good pitcher too. And you talk about Juan Nicasio. He's a guy who can be a starting pitcher too, but obviously he'll be battling for that fifth slot. But he can be a great long man out of the bullpen too. I mean, you talked about it. They've got depth on this team. You saw Friedman want to really bolster up that bullpen a little bit, especially with the injury to Kenley Jansen. But we're going to see how it's going to play out. But I mean, this is obviously a good rotation. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. The one question I still have about this team is the bullpen, especially with Jansen, who's going to be out 8 to 12 weeks, which means he's going to miss at least a month of the regular season. That leaves Joel Peralta, another offseason acquisition, who is an upgrade for them in that bullpen. But that leaves him as the closer, Baez as setup man, J.P. Howell, Paco Rodriguez, and Sergio Santos, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Oh, yeah, didn't work out with us though.
No, it did not. So that's going to be a big question about their bullpen. I mean, they tried giving Brian Wilson a shot. That didn't work out, and they just said, we're going to eat the money. We wish you the best of luck. So how they get their deep bullpen late in games to work out, especially because this is a playoff team, I think that's easy to say. How that works out is going to be a big question going forward.
Well, I think they're going to monitor as the season progresses. I mean, you've got Greinke, you've got Kershaw and Ryu, who can really go deep into ball games. McCarthy can give you at least a solid 6 innings. So, I mean, they're going to play out the season and see how it goes. I mean, you've also got, you can make a trade and acquire a reliever if you want to. But for now, I think they're just going to see how it works. It'll be interesting to see who fills that closer void, though. I think the favorites are going to have to be Joel Peralta and J.P. Howell. I mean, you've seen a lot of lefties really take on that closer role, and J.P. Howell is as reliable as they come too as a reliever. So be interesting to see. But I think they're fine for now. I do agree with you in the playoffs. You're going to need a great bullpen in the playoffs. I mean, you saw it with the Royals and you saw it with your Giants too. So I mean, they're going to need to spice it up too. But they've got a lot of guys who can really shock. I mean, a lot of guys on one-year deals too, but it'll be really interesting to see. But I'm not too worried about the bullpen just yet, especially not early in the season. But throughout the season, we're going to have to see what kind of adjustment they make.
Absolutely. I will say the Dodgers front office has made massive improvements. Obviously, they raided Tampa Bay, got Friedman, so that was a great move by them. You're going to see the scouting department improve. You're going to see just the moves they make, the contracts they offer improve. That was a great addition by them. And then we look towards the lineup, which you got J-Roll, you got Carl Crawford, who, I mean, when he was healthy last year, he actually played very well as their left fielder, and I think while he will be splitting some time with Andre Ethier, Crawford as that starter, I'm expecting a pretty good season from him. Yasiel Puig, who this is not, my stance on him is not very popular with Giants fans, but I absolutely love Puig. I love his passion for the game. I love the bat flips, everything about his game. Rounding out the lineup, you got Gonzo, you got Yasmani Grandal, Howie Kendrick, Juan Uribe, of course, the old-time Giant who gave them some playoff heroics. And in center field, you got Jock Peterson, the high-profile rookie who there are some questions about how many times he'll strike out, but he's got that power, and at the 8th spot, that's just a steal.
I mean, yeah, and I really liked. I mean, you talk about the trade. I mean, for trading Matt Kemp, it really opened up the spot for him to go in and perform. I mean, that's what I really like. And you spoke about management and Friedman. I really like what he did too. I mean, you got rid of D. Gordon, and then you bring in Howie Kendrick, you bring in Jimmy Rollins too. I mean, these are two guys who got 1 year left on their respective deals. that's not going to hurt any. That's not going to hurt any of your long-term development for certain prospects, especially Corey Seager, where they're really high, could be up as early as this year. I mean, I really like what they've done. I mean, they've got experience too. Howie Kendrick and Jimmy Rollins. I mean, Jimmy Rollins, a guy who's won a World Series, not the same player he once was, but I mean, that's going to give him some experience, and that's going to give him a great leadoff hitter, switch hitting leadoff hitter too. I mean, you talked about Yasiel Puig. That guy is electrifying, and he can be the best player in baseball if he really wants to. Obviously, he can be a head case at times, but the talent is just unreal. And you've got a good lineup too. I mean, I really like the acquisition of Yasmani Grandal in the trade as well. You saw a lot of good things. I mean, this is a new management that's gonna have a different approach too. They're gonna have the money to do so, but it's gonna be interesting to see what Friedman does, because in Tampa he obviously didn't have the resources to go out and spend. So it's gonna be interesting to see what kind of approach he does. But I think that it'll be better for the team as a whole, especially long term if they want to contend. I mean, as much as enticing as it is throwing money at everybody, you've seen it doesn't always work. So I mean, you don't want to be handcuffed with long term with deals, with really bad deals long term. You've seen that with the Yankees too. So, but overall, this lineup pretty darn good. They're talented too. I mean, they're going to contend for the NL West without a doubt too. I mean, it's a great division. A few teams can do so.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned, I mean, looking at the depth of this team, they have Andre Ethier as the fourth outfielder, and that may turn into a situation where he tells management, listen, I want out of here. And maybe that turns into a thing where they trade Ethier and they're going to get bullpen help to help for the playoff push. Also, looking at the bench, you have Alex Guerrero, who's an interesting case. I mean, they signed him a few years ago out of Cuba. Very talented player, although there's questions about if he has the arm to play third base or even the range and defensive capability of playing second base or shortstop. But if he's not impressive this year, they're in a bind because the contract he signed with them, he has the option of declining demotion to AAA. So it could turn into a situation where they're forced to look at either keep him on their roster or say, all right, we have to trade him to another team. And that's another area where they could say, all right, we're going to upgrade the bullpen.
I mean, yeah, you said. I mean, he signed a deal a few years ago, a long one too, pretty affordable too. Be interesting to see what they do. I don't think that's nearly the biggest problem for the Dodgers, but like you said, they could also use him as an asset. I mean, if he really impresses, maybe in spring training, you can monitor a situation and see what he can do, because he's got some potential. But I mean, in terms of that infield position, I mean, they're really just keen on Corey Seager for now, and I think they're going to really see where he slots in the infield and really focus in maybe on Alex Guerrero later. As far as Andre Ethier is concerned, I mean, that outfield's pretty deep too. I mean, you've got Scott Van Slyke as well coming off the bench, and he was a pretty good role player for them last year too. I mean, he had some big hits as well. But I mean, if you've got guys like that who aren't really going to be everyday players and possibly want to be, especially a guy like Andre Ethier, who thought he would be a starting right fielder before Puig just came in and just took over. I mean, you can, like you said, you can use it for the bullpen help. You can use it to maybe to add some more depth guys. You might have to eat some money though, but we'll see. But I mean, you can use all those guys as assets, and you can use those guys to trade for some people too.
Absolutely, and eating money, really, that's not going to be a problem for them. And you did mention the farm system, and that's another thing to be excited about, because as great as this team is in all the assets they have Jock Peterson, who could probably be a Rookie of the Year candidate. They have Corey Seager, who, as you mentioned, is considered pretty much a consensus top 10 prospect, top 5 by some. And then they have Julio Urias, who starting pitcher, who they're limiting his innings, but he has electric stuff. And as he works his way through up AA, up AAA, I mean, he could join a rotation with Ryu, with Kershaw, and Walt. Maybe you mentioned Greinke has the option to opt out, and he probably will, considering the money he can retrieve.
For sure.
But they'll have Urias ready to step into a spot in the rotation in a year or two.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, you see the first three guys that really stick out. I mean, Seager, Urias, and Peterson. Those are some great prospects too. And you mentioned Urias too. Got a great arm. Obviously, want to monitor him carefully and make sure that nothing goes wrong with his arm. I mean, he's got some great stuff. So, I mean, pairing him up with Kershaw on that rotation, and whoever comes along in the future years as well, I mean, that's going to be some dynamic stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And just looking at this team, obviously there's a lot to like. They're going to be the favorites in the NL West. I mean, even as a Giants fan, I have to say, as a Giants fan, I'm torn because you're supposed to not like the Dodgers. But as a baseball fan, this is a team that's going to be fun to watch. Then you move down. We're moving out of California now. We're moving over to Arizona, to the Arizona Diamondbacks, who they added Yasmani Tomas, who as right now has no defined position. Some have him listed as a starting third baseman, some as a starting left fielder. What do you think Yasmani Tomas can be for the Diamondbacks this season in his first season out of Cuba?
If you're looking at if I'm looking at the other Cubans in their first season in the big leagues, I think he can provide some. I mean, I think he can do a lot of special things. I mean, like you said, no really defined position. I mean, they said he was an outfielder, but they said he also doesn't have the mobility. He's got a great arm for third base too. But I mean, it's a nice pickup for the Diamondbacks, who really they have a really pretty good lineup too. So I mean, Yasmani Tomas, if there's anything you look at the previous Cubans who really entered the league in their first year, I mean, I'm expecting nothing but big things from this kid.
Absolutely. I'm one of those people. I've become a huge fan. Like when a Cuban player becomes available, immediately I'm looking for YouTube videos, looking at his numbers. There's a lot of players coming from Cuba, and they're bringing a lot of talent, and they're going to get a lot of money in return. He's going to add a big part to this lineup. I mean, you already have Paul Goldschmidt, who missed almost half the season. They're going to be excited to get him back. One of the best first basemen in the game, maybe the best. Well, of course, there's Miguel Cabrera. But then you have Mark Trumbo, another guy who battled injuries. Won't hit for a lot of average, will strike out plenty, but he brings that power. You got Tomas's power. And then you got some of the question marks. You got David Peralta in left field. They traded away Miguel Montero, so now they're looking at Tuffy Gozowich as their starting catcher. Chris Owings has some offensive potential at shortstop. There's injury questions. There's consistency questions. So really, just throughout the lineup, there are question marks, but the Goldschmidt, Trumbo, Tomas trio could do some big things power-wise.
They really could. That's going to be the heart of the lineup right there. I mean, you just talked about Goldschmidt. He's really one of the best right-handed hitters in baseball, if not one of the best two overall. He's got such great power, and Trumbo. And if Yasmani Tomas can provide the power that he's expected to as well, I mean, that's going to be a really, really hard, really scary lineup to face. It's going to be interesting with Trumbo, though, because I think that I don't know if he's in their long-term plans. I mean, he's got some value, too. I'm a really big fan of his, to be honest. You watched him as an LA Angel, and I was really excited when they acquired him, but the injuries have just derailed him a little bit. I mean, I thought the pairing of Goldschmidt and Trump would be phenomenal, but we haven't really gotten to see that much. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they really have some issues pitching-wise. Maybe they can acquire some young talent. I mean, there's a lot of guys who'd be interested in Mark Trumbo. Not sure how good of a right fielder he is anymore, but I mean, I think he's more suited in the American League for sure. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they do. And you saw some other guys in their lineup really emerge because they got some playing time too, like AJ Pollock. He played pretty well last year too in that leadoff position. And obviously Chris Owens, you mentioned he's got some offensive potential too, and even David Peralta. We're gonna have to see. There's a lot of question marks too with this team. They're young, but I like the direction they're headed in with their new management core too.
Absolutely. You mentioned the management. I mean, they added Tony La Russa as the chief baseball operator, and he kind of got his guy in Chip Hale as manager. They're starting to make the moves. I mean, they acquired Ruby De La Rosa. They acquired Alan Webster, just adding young arms to the rotation, which, I mean, Josh Colemanter, Jeremy Hellickson, Chase Anderson, De La Rosa, Cahill, and some other scattered names like Vidal Nuno. There's going to be questions, although they do have Patrick Corbin coming back from Tommy John surgery. They have Daniel Hudson, who a few years ago was looking like a number 2 starting pitcher.
Really? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember.
Had back-to-back Tommy John surgeries. So there's a question about if he'll go back to the bullpen or if he could potentially, they'll groom him back into being a starter again. They have the young arms in Braden Shipley and Archie Bradley, who are talented, but it'll be 6 months, maybe a year before they're ready. So the rotation questions are certainly there.
Well, I mean, there obviously are some question marks with the rotation, but you've got some young guys too. You mentioned it, Daniel Hudson. I mean, they acquired Jeremy Hellickson. You got Ruby De La Rosa too, and Chase Anderson. I mean, you can really monitor these guys and see how they play. I mean, this is all an audition role for them. Patrick Corbin's obviously their ace. He's going to return from Tommy John surgery. That was a big blow to them last year. A team which I thought that could surprise some people in the NOS, but not especially not with him being out. But you've got some guys who can really you can monitor them and see what they can do. There's a lot of potential in that rotation too. Not good enough to compete this year, of course, but you mentioned it. I mean, just audition these guys and see what they're capable of doing, see what they're made of. And you've got on the way Braden Shipley and Archie Bradley in another year. I mean, this is looking pretty good. I mean, if this team really molds nicely together, I mean, you've got some good stuff. I mean, we never even talked about Robbie Ray, who could be in the bullpen, a guy they got from the Tigers too. So it'll be really interesting to see. There's a lot of potential in this. Not good enough to compete with the big powerhouses of the NL West. But I mean, I really like what Tony La Russa's doing. He's a great baseball mind, and if I was a D-backs, I'd have a lot of trust in him. Have some patience though, of course. But there's some really great pieces to build on. Anytime you've got a guy like Paul Goldschmidt on your team, you've got to have. You've got to be excited about something too. So just building around him and kind of solidifying that rotation in the future years with some of the young guys in their system, I think it's going to be great for them.
Absolutely. You know, like you said, this is not going to be a playoff caliber team. It's going to take a little bit of time. But like looking forward to 2016, I mean, they should have a healthy Patrick Corbin. Archie Bradley should be ready. I mean, Jeremy Hellickson could be improved. De La Russa there should be some improvement there. So there's going to be a lot of improvement with this rotation. You know La Russa is going to add more pieces. So this could be a 75-win season, but I think with those 75 wins, there's going to be a lot of moments where as a Diamondbacks fan, you look at, and while it's disappointing initially, you're going to be excited about the future.
Well, for sure. I would be excited if I were a Diamondbacks fan. But again, patience is a big thing, but I'll be excited. There's really, I mean, with that rotation too, there's a lot of guys who can really contribute, but I mean, just got to monitor and be patient. I'm really excited to see Goldschmidt back in the mix. I mean, he's one of my favorite players in baseball, and he's such a joy to watch. But they're in the right direction for sure.
Absolutely. So with the NL West, we are left with Colorado Rockies, who their team direction is a little bit odd right now, hard to read. The rotation has questions. There's some young pieces like John Gray, a year away. Maybe could be up by the All-Star break. But this is a team that's still in rebuilding. So an option they could have is whether or not to trade guys like Troy Tulowitzki and Carlos Gonzalez. If you're running that front office, what decision are you making with those two?
I mean, you said it. I mean, that's really a hard team to read right now because they're not winning. They don't have the pitching to compete, but they've got two superstar caliber players who are very injury prone. I mean, I think it's just been a relationship that's happened too long between the two of them. I think the Rockies should try and move on. I mean, they can get a nice haul for Troy Tulowitzki. I just don't trust his health at this point. I mean, when healthy, he's the best shortstop in the game, of course. Just don't trust his health. And if you're the Rockies, I think you got to cash in on it right now, move on, and build something. Because if you don't have a pitching staff, you're really gonna have a tough time competing for a World Series. I mean, if you've got a guy like Troy Tulowitzki who can get you a nice haul, I mean, that's what you have to do. Even Carlos Gonzalez, even offensively, they're a great team. I mean, they can score runs. Even Nelson Arenado, I mean, really emerged in an offensive threat. I mean, you saw Michael Kadire last year, as well as what am I thinking of? Justin Morneau, sorry. I had a little brain fart there. But this is a team that can hit the baseball. Obviously, Kadire's gone. He's on the Mets now. But I think you need to cash in on those assets right now and just kind of build, because it's the worst thing is to be stuck in the middle, and that's where the Rockies seem to be right now.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned you have to have pitching to be a playoff team. Just fighting those series where you're going to have your four guys. And in playing in Colorado, they can get plenty of attractive hitters to come there because of the numbers. But you are going to have a tough time selling a pitcher on pitching at Coors Field where the ball is just going to carry. They're going to give up home runs. So I think you're right. Guys like Troy Tulowitzki, Carlos Gonzalez, and even maybe Willen Rosario, you have to just go out there, contact teams, find deals done to bring starting pitching in there. Young starting pitching as well. You can have contract control over their contracts, and that's going to start with Tulowitzki, who you can get a major haul for him. You can consult with the Mets, who have Syndergaard and a bunch of other talent there. So I think we're right on here in the same spot about if you're in that front office, answering all the phones you can, looking at offers for Tulowitzki, Gonzalez, and just getting the young talent, young starting pitching.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see as well, though. I mean, I think they might want to bank on a pretty healthy season from Tulowitzki, too, just for his value to rocket, too. But, I mean, I don't think you want to base it on that as well. I think you just want to trade him now because, I mean, his value is pretty high regardless of injuries or not. I mean, you mentioned the Mets. I mean, they're really desperate need for a shortstop. And Tulowitzki, I mean, they would gladly take on Tulowitzki, and they've got some young pieces to trade for them, too. Interesting to see what the Rockies do, though. I mean, I thought this should have been done earlier in the offseason. Didn't happen. They're going to move forward to spring training with him on the roster still. So we'll see. I mean, they still got some nice pieces too. I mean, Charlie Blackmon too had a good offensive year last year. He's been in some trade talks too, but there's a lot of question marks. I mean, the pitching staff especially. I mean, we spoke about it, but I think those guys can just really help bolster that rotation too.
Absolutely. So it is spring training time. We've gone through the entire NL West, and I'm planning to go through every division. Obviously, my friend, we're going to have you on for the AL East, and potentially even more because, I've had a lot of fun talking baseball. We both have knowledge. We both just a lot of fun. We went for nearly 50 minutes. So where can
Time
people
flies.
follow you at to talk baseball with you, basketball? Obviously, Toronto Raptors play in a few minutes. So where can people follow you on Twitter?
You can follow me at John_Rallis. And then you can hit me up and talk hoops, baseball, hockey, football. I'm into anything. Hit me up. I'm a huge sports guy.
Excellent. And John, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. Had a blast talking the NL West with you.
Hey, likewise, man. Anytime, Matt. Have fun in Sacramento. Hope your Kings figure things out. I look forward to your preview tomorrow.
This has been the Very Good Sports Podcast. I want to thank everyone for listening. Obviously, Sacramento Kings episode is coming tomorrow.